In Deuteronomy 29, beginning with verse 9, we have our Parsha Nitzavim. Nitzavim means to stand. And it says there, all of you stand here today. And even as our young people come, I always want them to stand before Torah. And I want them to stand before Torah, especially the little ones. The ones that have come a little older will remember, but the ones that are even babies that have grown up standing here, when they get old, they will remember this. They will remember that when I was small, I stood before the Torah. I wish I would have that memory. But we do all have memories, whether Catholic or Protestant, of remember reading the Gospels. The priest or the pastor would read the Gospels. They would read a verse in a sermon. Whether it was Catholic or Protestant, we remember that. I remember reading the Gospels. I remember the epistles. I remember what they call the Old Testament reading, or in Baptist churches or Pentecostal churches. You remember going and them reading from the Bible. You remember that. But now what we're doing is we're actually shifting gears and having our children remember something that our ancestors years and years, thousands of years ago, almost 3,000 years ago, 3,500 years ago with Moses, remember standing in front of Moses, Joshua, and having the actual scrolls read at the first. And I want our kids to go back there. Go back to the beginning and be able to grow up saying, I stood before the Torah. I actually heard, and I started, I didn't start learning Hebrew till, again, late in life, but one of the things that I wish I could have had is had learned Hebrew early in life. And I really encourage every young people here to start learning Hebrew. Start teaching Hebrew to your children, your grandchildren, even babies. Just start with Aleph, Bet, and just start learning to give them sounds and words, and so that they could start learning and having these words and just speak to their ears. Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. Speak to them and tell them these words. Well, it says here, all of you stand here today in the presence of Yahweh, your Elohim, the heads of your tribes, your elders, your scribes, all the men of Israel, with your children and your wives. And it's important that we together, our elders here, our scribes, our workers, men, women, children, wives, every one of us on a weekly basis come to Shabbat. By the way, Shabbat is not an optional meeting time. It's a commanded meeting time. Shabbat is a moed. And there's two things you do, two major protocols for the moed of Shabbat. Protocol number one is that today is a day of rest. From sundown last night to sundown tonight, it's rest. Activity just ceases. The activity in the house, the going out and doing this and that, it begins by just having a simple meal at home and resting, relaxing. The rest of the day, relax. By the way, Shabbat is not an all-day Bible study. A lot of people have this idea that Shabbat is the day that you read the Bible all day long. Well, that's not what Shabbat is. In Shabbat, you have a sacred assembly. That's what we're doing here. On Shabbat, you have a sacred assembly. Yes, you do. It says there. It's not optional. Did you know it's not optional to assemble on Shabbat? It's commanded. You are commanded to be in sacred assembly. You're not commanded to be here, but you're commanded to assemble as a body at some place and at some time on Shabbat. This is just one of the places where you could assemble. I think it's the best, but it's just one of the places. Not the only place, right? We're not the only people, right? We're not the only people. Always remember that. We're not the only. We're just one of many. And put that in our minds so that we don't become as we're the only one. No, we're not. But we are a place of assembly. And so if you're not at this place of assembly on Shabbat, you should be at some place of assembly on Shabbat. You should be someplace where they are assembling around Torah. Because Torah is one of the main aspects of assembly. And again, we see this from Nehemiah. In fact, we're going to see some of it today in Moses, but later on Nehemiah, we see it with Yeshua. Yeshua himself gathered at Shabbat. Paul gathered at Shabbat. And so we'll see more of this. But it says, you stand in front, in the presence. And the word presence of Adonai, as it says, Lifnei Yahweh. Lifnei is in front of, face to face. When you come to sacred assembly, when you stand in the presence of Yahweh as a community, as a group. Now, every one of you could stand in the presence of Adonai every day. At any time you want. You and Adonai. Many of you do that. Where every day you stand before him, face to face, and it says, cara a cara. Lifnei, before him, panaim al panaim, cara a cara, face to face. And they stood in the face-to-face in the presence of Yahweh, your Elohim. It says, all these people, the stranger, even the stranger, and the word stranger here is the word good. Even the good, the proselyte, the person that has joined Israel, who was a Gentile. A good is someone that grew up as a Gentile, grew up as someone from another nation, another religion, but has decided that the Elohim of Israel is Elohim, that Yahweh is Elohim, and we want to follow the ways of Yahweh. It's always been there. It's not just now Jew and Gentile. It's always been there. The stranger. Even if the stranger is in your camp, whether he cuts wood or draws your water. Because that's how they came. When they came to Israel, people from other countries, they came to cut wood, to draw water. They came as bottom line workers. And when they repented and accepted Israel, they became as Israel and married at Israel. Then little by little they assimilated into Israel faith and culture. Whether he cuts wood, and you are about to enter into covenant of Yahweh your Elohim, a covenant ratified with dire sanctions, which he has made with you today, by which today he makes a nation of you, and he himself becomes the Elohim of you, as he promised, and he has sworn to his fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. Think of this. They are standing in the presence of Yahweh. Now, they're believers. They're believers. They put their faith in Yahweh. They've studied under Moses now for 40 years. They've seen all those situations, and Adonai is going to renew and make covenant with them, cut a covenant with them with dire sanctions. The word dire sanctions really means, and as we studied last week, and you'll go home and finish up studying today, the dire sanctions is, if you follow Adonai, you'll be blessed. But if you do not follow Adonai, there's curses in your life. A lot of people today are living under a curse. It's not a curse that someone has cursed you. By the way, don't worry about people cursing you. Don't ever worry about people cursing you if you are walking with Adonai. If you're walking with Adonai and somebody tries to throw a curse on you, it'll bounce back on them. But if you're not walking with Adonai, if you're not following his mishpatim, his chukim, then Adonai will take his hands of protection from around us and curses will come in. If we decide that we are not going to walk with Adonai, and there are people today, now, yeah, they call themselves believers. They're praising. In fact, they say, I'm in the covenant. But Adonai is going to tell them, I'm going to take my hands off of you. In fact, Adonai is going to tell them, I'm going to bring curses upon you, and I'm going to discipline you. I don't care what you say. You say, well, that's Old Testament. What did Yeshua say? Many will come to me on that day, say, didn't we prophesy in your name? Didn't we do this in your name? Didn't we do that in your name? And Yeshua says, I will tell them, I never knew you. Away from me, you workers of iniquity. By the way, the word iniquity there, check it out. Check it out. In the Greek of the New Testament, says those with no Torah, those that do not follow Torah. And of course, the Greek of the New Testament is nomos, those that don't follow nomos, those that don't follow the Torah. That's what a iniquity means, not following Torah. And so here he goes on to say, today he makes a nation of you. When did Israel become a nation? Abraham was called, Isaac was called, Yaakov was called. He had 12 sons. They went into Egypt. In Egypt, in the furnace of Egypt, it's called, they were molded, and then Adonai exited us out of Egypt. We were taken out of Egypt by his mighty hand. And for 40 years, he took us to Sinai and gave us his covenant. And then for 40 years, he molded us, and he took away from us, and he added to us, and he took away those that were excommunicated. In fact, many of those he killed. He actually killed. He destroyed. The fire came down, or the earth opened up and sucked them down because they would not follow. And then he took us across from the Jordan, and that's where we're at today. And he says, today, this is the last day of Moses' life. The last day of Moses' life. He says, today, he's making a nation out of you. And that day was what we call when the nation of Israel was incorporated. That's incorporation day. They had been associated together, but here I make a nation out of you, and I become your Elohim. There comes a time, and there has come a time with every one of us, when we decided that he was going to be our Elohim, and Yeshua was going to be our Messiah. We accepted Yeshua as the Messiah. There comes a time in everyone's life. You know, one of the things that is different in Torah teaching than in the way many people today grow up is that we expect, like every one of us had a time when we might have been believers in Elohim, but for some reason, and does not have to happen. It happens in every one of our families. But people grow up knowing the word and then they leave. They leave because of the flesh. They leave because of the culture around us. If we lived in Israel at the time, it would be a little harder, but we live in a free society. And people go out and do their own thing, and we've been taught you are free. You do whatever you want and no consequences. Well, let me tell you, if you do whatever you want, there will be consequences, as we have found out, our children have found out, our friends have found out. There are consequences to not following Adonai. How many of you believe that? There are mighty big, dire sanctions, even today. And those dire sanctions show up today in our lives as regrets. Right now. Right now, without raising your hands to protect the guilty, how many of you are filled with regrets? I should have done this. I should not have done that. I blew it here. And so we are filled with regrets. Well, we would not be filled with regrets if we, from the moment that we were young, if we followed Torah. That's why young people follow Torah now. Because if you don't follow Torah now, there will be regrets. And those regrets will show up in later life. And sometimes we will live with the consequences of our sin for the rest of our lives. Verse 13 and 14. Not with you alone, with these people that are standing here, Moses, Joshua, the elders, the heads of the tribes, the men, the women, the children, the proselytes, not only with you alone do I make this covenant today and pronounce these sanctions, but with him also who is not here today. To him who is not here today. You know what's really interesting? Israel as a nation is the chosen nation. The chosen nation. The chosen people. Of all the nations of the world, all the nations are the same. The nation of Israel is different. It's interesting that with the Native Americans, with the Celtic people, the German peoples, the Chinese, everybody, and even with the DNA that's going on, we always look at percentages. Part, German, I'm part Cherokee, or I'm part Hispanic, I'm part this. And, we all look at all these parts. And in some groups around the world, you are not allowed to call yourself that unless you have a certain percentage. Like here in New Mexico, you can't be part of the Pueblo unless you have a percentage of blood of that Pueblo or of that reservation or of that Native American group. Those things happen in China, in other areas of the world today also. That's not the way it is with Israel. And here's one area where it is very solemn. Here's one area where Adonai says, I make this covenant not only with you guys that are here, but with those that are not here. Well, who are those that are not there? They're the children that are going to be born to these people that are standing. The people that were standing, it's to their grandchildren, great-grand, and all the way down to the end of time that were not at Sinai. I wasn't at Sinai. You guys weren't at Sinai. Did you know that no Jew was at Sinai that's living today? We weren't at Sinai. But Adonai doesn't have this idea of, well, you're half of this and half of that. Oh, you're, a quarter Jewish, or you're half Jewish. So if you're half Jewish, no, the word doesn't have that. Modern Israel might have that. Judaism might have that. But Adonai doesn't have that. What he has is if you go up and you trace your line up and you find out that these people were your upline, that Abraham was your upline and your ancestor, that Moses, that those people that were there that day at Sinai were your upline, then you are one of the ones that wasn't there, and that covenant is with you. That covenant is with you. I just had a friend of mine who just found out that he did his DNA, and he found out that he calls me and tells me, guess what? I'm 3% Ashkenazi. I'm 3% Ashkenazi. He says, can you feature that? I'm 3% Ashkenazi. And I told him, well, congratulations, because now you're part of the covenant. You just set yourself as part of the covenant, because if you could trace your line up and your DNA says that you have this upline and you have this, even if it's 1%, then you're liable to the covenant. You're liable to the covenant. And if you break the covenant, if you don't follow the covenant, then the liability and the dire sanctions will come in. You might even say, but I am 100% Gentile. I don't have no Jewish line with me. So, I'm not in the covenant. But wait a second. Have you accepted Yeshua as your Messiah, as the Son of the living Elohim? Do you believe that Yeshua the Messiah is Yahweh? Yes, I do. Were you baptized under Yeshua's name and authority? Yes, I was. Well, then, now you are a descendant of Abraham. You are part of Israel. So therefore, you brought yourself into the covenant. You see, following Yeshua doesn't get you out of the law. Following Yeshua actually brings you under Torah. A lot of people don't know that. In fact, most people believe that once you accept Yeshua, the law has been nailed to the cross, and whether you're Jew or Gentile, the law, you don't have to follow the law. But it's the opposite. When you accept Yeshua the Messiah, you come under the Torah. And now the Torah becomes our way of life, as we're going to see. Not for salvation, but because now Yeshua has paid the price to bring us under the covenant. Not with you alone that are here today, but to those that are not here today, as well as to him who stands with us in the presence of Yahweh. So you're standing face to face with Yahweh, but if someone isn't here, unborn, someone from another country at the time that comes in, In fact, this includes all the relatives of Yeshua. Did you know that even Yeshua did not have a perfect Jewish or Hebrew lineage? He wasn't a perfect Jew. He wasn't a perfect Hebrew. In fact, Yeshua had Canaanite in him. Did you know Yeshua had Canaanite? He had Moabite. The great women of the Bible, Sarah, Rebecca, Leah, Rachel, all these great women, the wife of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and all these great women that were part of Yeshua's upline, great women. In Matthew chapter 1, where it shows Yeshua's genealogy, Yeshua's upline, none of the great women of the Bible are mentioned. There's 4 women that are mentioned, 3 by name, the other one, not even named, are there. And these women are all Gentile women, grandmothers of Yeshua. Yeshua had Gentile grandmothers, Canaanite grandmothers, Moabite grandmothers. Now, Ruth was a Moabite priestess. She had served in the Moabite religion. We have these, in fact, Bathsheba isn't even mentioned. It just talks about the wife. And this is Yeshua's great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. So even Yeshua did not have a perfect DNA, Jewish, Hebrew, Israelite DNA. Nobody does. Nobody ever has. But yet, Yeshua was under the covenant. Everyone. Doesn't matter who or other people that have come in. If you have Hebraic heritage or you've been grafted into the olive tree of Israel, today you stand as Israel here. You know, it doesn't matter to me who's Jewish or who's not Jewish. It doesn't matter to me who's male or female. It doesn't matter to me who's rich or poor. These designations don't work with who is Yahweh's. What matters is, are you in the covenant? The first covenant and the renewed covenant. The covenant that he renewed when Yeshua came and took the cup and says, this is the cup of the Brit Chadashah, the new covenant. This covenant that he's making with today, Yeshua renewed it. On the night that he was betrayed, Yeshua renewed that covenant. This is the cup of the Brit Chadashah, the renewed covenant. Not another covenant, not a covenant for Gentiles, not a covenant that brings in Christianity, but a covenant that brings Israel together. And whoever wants to join Israel from among the nations. By the way, that's the good news. The good news is that the covenant that Yeshua renewed with Israel and Judah is not for Israel and Judah alone. It's for whosoever will. That's good news. Because at that time, the only ones that were part was Israel and the very few people that came in as proselytes. And there was very few. But they were there. But now, the whole world is open to be part of Torah. It is a privilege to be part of Torah. Let's go further on. Verse 17. Let there be no man or woman among you, no clan or tribe, whose heart turns away from Yahweh your Elohim to go and serve the gods of those nations. One of the things that Adonai always abhors is idolatry. Idolatry is serving other gods. Serving other gods, the gods of the nations. Now, the gods of the nations could be statues, yeah, and the majority at the time was statues. But there was other gods. In fact, the kings, the pharaohs, the emperors were gods, and people served them. They worshiped the gods. They worshiped Pharaoh as God. They worshiped Caesar as God. They worshiped Caesar as Adonai. They worshiped Caesar as equal to Yahweh. In fact, Paul says, whose food is their God. Did you know that a lot of people, food is their God? The God food. Whose food is their God, Paul says, that they were so engrossed in food that became their God. And today, we have all kinds. Did you know that most people today follow the gods and goddesses of football, baseball? These have become the gods and goddesses of today. You say, well, this football player is not my God. Oh, yes, he is. Because you do whatever he says. You follow him. In fact, I am really upset this week as Nike. You know what? I have always boycotted Nike. I've never owned a pair of Nike apparel or shoes since they came out. I've not allowed, unless Kendra or someone snuck in, a pair of Nike shoes or anything, but they've grown up with no Nike. No Nike. Why have I always boycotted Nike? Because Nike is the Greek word victory, and if it's used in a grammatical way, the victory of Yeshua, no problem. But here's the problem. Why did the company called Nike name their company and their shoe Nike? Because as a sports company, they wanted victory. Victory, sports, hey, that fits, no problem. But anybody know who Nike is? Oops. A lot of people don't know who Nike is. In fact, if you Google the goddess Nike, you'll come up with several pornographic statues. Every time Nike shows up, it's a female, and she's bowing, that she's usually like this, and her hand is on her shoe, on her slipper. And one of the things about Nike is that most of the Nike statues that we have found are very pornographic, very revealing. And remember, scripturally, we need to dress to conceal, not dress to reveal. If you dress to reveal, that's immodesty. If we dress to conceal, that's modest. Nike does not dress to conceal. And so I've always not allowed Nike. I've always been against Nike because of that. But now we have a bigger problem. Because now we have people that are anti-constitution, that are part of the one world government, that are trying to destroy our way of life. And I am against all these people who bend the knee to protest the flag. If you're going to bend the knee to Adonai and serve him. But when they bend the knee, they're not bending the knee to serve Adonai. They're bending the knee to serve the God of this world, Hasatan, against our way of life here in America. And so I am again, this guy Kaepernick, and the new ad he put on for Nike. I don't know if you've all caught that, but he said that I can't remember what the ad says, but it has the gist of saying that do whatever you want, even if it means sacrificing everything. Is that about what it said, those of you that read it? Even if it means sacrificing everything. Well, let me tell you, instead of sacrificing everything, this guy is going to get a ton of money from Nike for what he did and what he said. And I would encourage everyone here and everyone listening on live stream to boycott Nike. To boycott, and like I said, I've boycotted them all my life. I've never owned a pair of anything. I've seen some really nice shoes or really nice clothes, and oh man, this is such a nice jacket, and oh, there's the swoosh. Anybody know what the swoosh is? The swoosh is the little wing of the goddess from the shoe. And the male counter of Nike, Mercury, who's the messenger, has a swoosh. And that swoosh is the wings of the goddess. I don't want the wings of a goddess on me, because that's why they got that name, for the goddess of victory. And I don't want that on me, because you see, these are other gods. These are other gods that people are following today, whether they're gods of men, whether they're movie stars or music. People worship these people. Young teenagers worship these people. You say, well, they don't worship them. I don't worship them. One of the problems that we're having today in many Messianic congregations is that everybody wants to follow Torah. Oh, we want to do the feast. Oh, you're not wearing your tzitzit right. They have to be exactly this way. And they get all concerned when, I've been teaching this for many, many years, and I get all these new Johnny-come-latelys and saying, oh, you're doing it wrong. This is the way you should. Wait a second. I've been studying this for years, and this is what the Torah says. But I've noticed that there is this real strange trend in Messianic congregations. And it actually, even this morning, someone came up and they kind of got a little upset with me, and they took off. They left, upset. And they came up to me and mentioned, oh, tithing is not for today. Now, these guys are very strong Messianic. And in the last month, I've had confrontations with several people that are not here today on the issue of tithing. On the issue that tithing was for the Old Testament. Wait a second. You guys are totally Messianic in every other way. You even got mad at me because I didn't wear my tzitzits the way you wanted me to wear them. And then, why is it that tithing is not for today when everything else is? So this guy got mad at me this morning because of tithing. The tithing is not for today. There's no temple. Well, if there's no temple, then we should not do any feast, anything. And this is what's scary, because it's not just one person in the last month or two or month and a half, but it's been about 5 people, 10 people if I'm thinking like Josephus, but probably about 5 people but that have come to me and says, we don't believe in tithing, and several of you have told me, you know what, so-and-so told me that we shouldn't be tithing. So if you get a no tithing person telling you don't tithe because tithing is not in scriptures, tithing is not in the New Testament, please have them see me or give me their name, because I really want to talk to them. Because this is spreading in Messianic congregations, not just here, but in other Messianic congregations. This idea of not tithing is spreading around, not giving tithings and offerings or doing whatever you want. Tithing is a very biblical, like everything else, like Shabbat, like kosher, like all these other things. Tahara, we do tahara. We don't have a temple. But Adonai is bringing us back, restoring us to a time and a place that he never stopped. That the apostles and Yeshua never stopped. And it says there, who serves other gods, let there be no root among you bearing fruit that is poisonous and bitter. We call this the root of bitterness. Never let a root of bitterness come up in you. There should be no root of bitterness, and there's all kinds of bitter people today. Now, watch this. Please underline this one. It says, if after hearing these sanctions, such a man should bless himself in his heart and say, I may follow the desires of my own heart and still lack nothing. Much water drives away thirst. Yahweh will not pardon him. We have so many people like that today. I could do whatever I want, no consequences. I'm still going to be blessed. I'm still under the blessings of Adonai. You know, so many people think they're prophets, think they're evangelists, they're pastors, they're teachers, apostles. They think all these things of who they are, what they are. They think that I have a gift of prophecy or I speak in tongues. I'm a tongue speaker. But their walk doesn't match their talk. What they say they are, who they say, doesn't match their lifestyle. And there's all kinds of people that are living contrary to even the 10 Commandments. Just 10. Contrary to the 10 Commandments. And yet they're all on fire for the Lord. You know, we can't say, I could follow the desires of my heart and Adonai is still going to be blessed, is still going to bless me. No, he's not. If you follow the desires of your heart, Adonai is not going to bless you. You have to follow the desires of his heart to be blessed. Well, in my heart, I believe this. I don't care about your heart. Why? Because the heart is desperately wicked. Who could know its ways? Never follow the desires of your heart. Follow the Torah. Well, I feel this. I feel that Adonai forgives me for doing this. I feel, you want to know how crazy it gets? Now, this is real stuff. You know how they say truth is stranger than fiction? This is real stuff. I had a guy in my office a week and a half ago. And he came to advertise a Christian thing that he wanted us to join up. In fact, a messianic thing, Christian messianic. He's trying to unite the Christians and the messianics together. And he had this thing that he wanted us to be part of. And I said, I don't think we could be part of it. I don't want to put my name to this. And as he was trying to encourage me to get part of, he says a few cuss words. And I say, please be careful with the language. Oh, he says, those are just colorful adjectives. Look how stupid, how idiotic it gets. You know what he told me? You know what he told me? I'm serious. He seriously told me this. He says, you know what? I prayed and asked, and he says Yahweh. He says, I prayed and asked Yahweh if I could use those colorful languages, and Yahweh said I could. What? If after hearing these sanctions, you're going to be cursed if you do this, such a man should bless himself in his heart and say, I may follow what I want, the dictates of my own heart, and still lack nothing. In other words, Adonai is going to bless me. Whatever I do, whatever I say, I'm blessed of Yahweh. I could live like this, I could live like that, I could take drugs, I could do whatever I want. I'm a man of Elohim. I'm a woman of Elohim. I'm a prophet, I'm a prophetess. I'm a pastor, I'm a teacher. I'm this, I'm that. Adonai says, Yahweh will not pardon him. The wrath and jealousy of Yahweh will blaze against such a man. Every curse written in this book will fall on him, and Yahweh will blot his name out from under heaven. Yahweh will single him out from all the tribes of Israel to his destruction in accordance with the curses of the covenant written in this scroll of Torah, this Torah scroll. That's it. You say, well, that's Old Testament. Please go with me for a moment to the book of Hebrews. And here in the book of Hebrews, it goes on to say, chapter 10, verse 26. If you think that the Old Testament law was hard, you don't know what being a believer in Yeshua is all about. If after we have been given knowledge of the truth, verse 26, 10:26, if after we've been given knowledge of the truth, we should deliberately commit any sins, then there is no longer a sacrifice for them. There will be left only the dreadful prospect of judgment and the raging fire that is to burn apostates, rebels. Anyone who disregards the Torah of Moses, that's what we're talking about. Anyone who disregards the Torah of Moses is ruthlessly put to death on the word of 2 or 3 witnesses. And you may be sure that anyone who tramples on the Son of Elohim or treats the blood of the covenant, Exodus 24:8, which sanctified him as if it were not holy, and who insults the Spirit of grace, the unpardonable sin, will be condemned to a far severer punishment. We are all aware that it was said, Deuteronomy 32, vengeance is mine, I will repay. That's our portion today. And again, Yahweh will judge his people. It is a dreadful thing to fall into the hands of the living Elohim. If you think the Old Testament was hard, coming into Yeshua is even harder. Not softer, not easier. Grace is not easier. Grace is harder. Because if you insult the Spirit of grace, if you abuse grace and use grace as a way out of your sin, buddy, you're in trouble. We are in trouble. We're not talking the law. We're talking grace. We're talking grace. It's because a lot of people don't understand grace. We don't understand what grace is. We don't understand what the mercy and grace of Adonai, Elohim, so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. We were all sinners. Every one of us was a sinner. We were all condemned to death. But he saved us. Now that we're saved, what do we do with our salvation? That's why he says, work out your salvation in fear and trembling. Notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say work for your salvation. Please don't work for your salvation. You'll never work long enough, hard enough to even get a single portion of it. But it says work out your salvation. In other words, your salvation was a free gift, a package deal. When you get a package deal, if I give you a gift and it's in a package and you unpack it, you get rid of those little bubble things, the little S's, those little, styrofoam things, and you open it up, you take it apart, you bring out the pieces, you get the little book that you throw away because you know how to build it anyway, and you do it, and all of a sudden you're working out the gift that you were given, and you set it up, and there it is. Well, in a sense, your salvation was a free gift. Now, the gift that you have, work it out. And we're going to be working out our salvation till the day we die. And that's what Torah is all about. That's what Torah is all about. So if we think that the law of Moses was hard, you don't know what Yeshua's salvation and what grace is all about. And we'll talk more about that later. There's a couple of things that I'm losing time, but I want to go here. Verse 28. Oh man, there's so much. Things hidden belong to Yahweh our Elohim, but things revealed are ours and our children for all time, so that we may observe all the words of this Torah. Things hidden belong to Yahweh our Elohim. There's two types of things. There's two types of knowledge. There's two types of everything. What is hidden and what has been revealed. What has been revealed is what has been written is from Genesis to Revelation. Genesis to Revelation belongs to you and your children so that you would follow and observe Torah. It's been revealed. It is written in our responsibility as interpreters. Our responsibility as interpreters, by the way, a pastor, a teacher is actually an interpreter. It is my responsibility to come to the Hebrew and the Greek and to interpret what it says here from the Hebrew and Greek and give it to you in this language. Perfect example is Ezra. Nehemiah chapter 8, when Ezra got the Torah scrolls and he read them in Hebrew, and it says, and he explained to them in their language, was at that time Aramaic. We do it in Spanish, we do it in English, and that's our responsibility. But the things hidden. One of the most important things that I want to make sure that especially young men and ladies that want to teach the younger women that you want to be a pastor someday, you want to be a teacher, always remember, if we don't know what the verse means, the best thing to say is, I don't know. Rather than to think or to try to get something from what you've been taught or from something else and say, this is what it means, because we don't want to pass misinformation. Especially on the hidden things. You know, there's a lot of things that we know, but there's a lot of things that we don't know. In fact, sometimes I used to know everything. There was a time when I knew everything. I knew who the Nephilim were and where they came from and all that. I knew about this and I knew about that. And I taught this and I taught that. But coming to the Hebraic, trying to learn Hebraically, and especially some of my Hebraic and Jewish teachers that I've had and other people, is I've learned to start thinking differently. And start thinking, wait a second. We don't know everything. And that's why it's like sometimes people ask me, and they ask me about, what about this, and what's my answer? You know what? I don't know. And I don't think anybody else knows. I always tell them too, because sometimes people say, well, I tell them I don't know, and they say, well, he's a dummy. I better go to someone who really knows. And they go to someone who really knows. And the guy who really knows tells them what it is. And then they come back to me and says, oh, you know that question that you said you didn't know? Well, I asked so-and-so, or I was in the internet, so-and-so, or so-and-so said this and that. And this is what it is. And it is some weird stuff. Something off the wall that I said, you know what, that guy doesn't know either. Because there's some stuff that nobody knows yet. We don't know that. That's why be careful what you teach. Be careful if you call yourself a teacher. And you know what people have told me? Well, I'm not a teacher. Well, then what are you doing teaching? Well, I'm not a pastor. Don't call me a pastor. I'm not a pastor. Well, what are you doing pastoring? You know, there's people that have even left from here that are pastoring and teaching in their homes. And sometimes we need to do that. We started from a home, and if Adonai opens a place in the East Mountains, we'd probably start in a home. There's nothing wrong with starting in a home, having home Bible studies. But sometimes people do home studies because they don't want to be under authority, and what they do is they gather a flock of sheep, and oh, we're not a pastor, and pastor, just know that I'm not trying to say I'm a pastor, but then these sheep are under your direction. You better be careful what you teach. That's why Scripture says, not many of you be teachers, because a teacher is going to get a double judgment. And by the way, ladies, if you are a teacher, can women teach? Of course they can. But remember, do not have men under your authority. Because a woman teacher cannot have men under their authority. And if you do, those men, you become a Jezebel, and those men become Ahabs. Every congregation that has a woman teacher, remember, that's the spirit of Jezebel. The spirit of Jezebel is not a prostituting spirit like I've heard for many years. The spirit of Jezebel is where a woman decides to be over a man of Elohim. That was Jezebel, right? Who did she want to be over? Elijah. In fact, she made Elijah run. Literally. And she wanted to be over her husband. A Jezebel spirit is a woman that wants to be over her husband and over the man of Elohim. Those are the two marks of a Jezebel. By the way, did you know that there's no prophetesses in the New Testament? The Tanakh has several prophetesses, but there's only one prophetess in the New Testament. Book of Revelation, Yeshua calls her Jezebel, because she had that spirit of Jezebel, a woman who claimed to be a prophetess in a New Testament congregation. So just be careful in some of these areas, especially trying to bring these hidden things. And, a lot of these new upcoming teachers that are, some of these upcoming teachers are not in any, they're not in any church, denomination, congregation, fellowship. I was associated with a lot of these itinerant teachers. They're not under anybody's authority, but they're just going around teaching all kinds of things. And one of the things I noticed is that they're always trying to teach something new. They're trying to get hidden stuff on this and that, and trying to, so that they could say, well, so-and-so brought that up. Some of that stuff is the hidden stuff that belongs to Adonai that none of us knows, but they're trying to make a name for themselves on some of this hidden stuff. And some of that hidden stuff, in fact, even last week I had to correct someone, say, be careful with the book of Jubilees. Be careful with the book of Jasher, because they said, well, the book of Jasher says this and this and this. Oh, wait a second. There's no such thing as the book of Jasher. There's no such thing as the book of Jubilees and the book of Enoch. Oh, yeah, there's books by those names. There's, they've even been found as far as the Dead Sea Scrolls. Remember, the majority of what's in the Dead Sea Scrolls is not biblical. And much of that comes from Jewish myths and all these kinds of, be careful with, you guys don't have time. And the reason I know you don't have time is because I don't have time. I don't have time to read all those books. All our time is spent on Torah and the Bible. Why get stuff from other places, hidden stuff? Oh, this is hidden. This is esoteric knowledge that we didn't know. Just like the joke I always say about the guy who asked me about the giant and the giant on Noah's Ark. And because I didn't know the answer, he thought I was a dummy. Well, the reason I didn't know the answer is that it's not in Scripture. He thinks it's in Scripture because it's in the Talmud. But the Talmud is in Scripture. The Mishnah is in Scripture. These are things that are Jewish myth, Paul calls them. Let's see, the other thing that I wanted to do is verse 11, chapter 30, verse 11. For this Torah I give you today is not beyond your strength or beyond your reach. In other words, the Torah is not a burden. The Torah should not be a burden. If the Torah becomes burdensome to you, you're not following Torah. You're probably following extra Torah stuff. Because the Torah should be simple. It's not beyond your reach. It's not something that is far away. It's not something that is under the sea. It's actually in our mouth. And how is it in our mouth? If we read it. In fact, did you know that in biblical times, people didn't read silently? They actually read out loud. And I would encourage you that when you read, and you're probably going to have to get to, by yourself someplace, sit in your car and read the Torah, because some people might say, well, can you quiet down or go to a park or do something, get in your office, in your closet, and not only pray, but read the Torah out loud. Read the Torah out loud so that you could hear it, so that it becomes part of you, so that you could hear. In fact, and once you start learning Hebrew, you could start reading the Torah in Hebrew and be able to, even if you do it under your breath, you do it silent, still speaking it out. Breshit bara Elohim et hashamayim va et haaretz. All of a sudden, you start getting that. Oh man, there's so much. But let's go ahead and stop here. And let's go ahead and stand. And as you all stand, I'm going to read verse 19. Let's go ahead and stand. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today. I set before you life or death, blessing or curse. Choose life then, so that you and your descendants may live in the love of Yahweh your Elohim, obeying his voice, clinging to him, for in this your life consists, and on this it depends, your long stay in the land which Yahweh swore to our fathers Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, that he would give to them. And Father, even today, as we have endeavored to come back to Torah, there's so much that we still don't understand. There's still so much that we need to be revealed to us by your Ruach. We know that the things that are hidden belong only to you. But what you've revealed, and as Paul says in 1 Corinthians, Father, keep to what is written. Keep to what is written. That we would keep to what is written in your scriptures, in your Torah, in Genesis to Revelation, not what has been passed on. And yeah, today has been written down, but it's been passed down over the generations. Father, bless your people here today. I ask that you unite us in your Torah, in your word, in the teaching. We bless you, Father. Yevrechecha Yahweh va'ishmerecha. Ayir Yahweh panav elecha v'chunecha. Asa Yahweh panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up the light of his covenant upon you and give you his peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day. By the way, for those of you that know Sister Maggie from Las Vegas, she just lost her son, and we're probably going to be, we might be doing a tahara for them in Las Vegas, but be praying. And Sister Joanne, she's not here with us today, but she lost her father. We did her funeral in Tajika this week, and so be praying for those ones that have lost loved ones. Shalom, shalom, and have a good day. What's that? 29.